Really excited to be back. Thank you very much, Greg, for bringing me back to do some more tying. Ever since I tied for you all the last time, I don't know if you had a good time. I really did. I really enjoyed it. So I really appreciate you all letting me come back and tie some more for you. I know last time we did kind of my variation on a tactical hare's ear nymph, kind of like that competition style with a slotted tungsten bead on it. And we're going to do a similar pattern today in kind of a variation on a pheasant tail, but we're also going to do one that has been really productive for me as a dropper fly when running a two fly rig. And I know you all really like to focus on nymphs, and I have to say you're challenging me tonight, because mostly what I've been tying is stuff like this, you know, 6-7 inch articulated streamers. These are for throwing down at the White River for big browns. And then going from tying this and then to tying this is a little bit of a challenge. So I had to kind of squint my eyes and lean over my vise this evening to work up some samples for you. So mostly I've been tying big stuff, so just getting back into tying this little stuff for you guys. But these nymphs, there's no doubt about it, they're absolutely deadly, and we're gonna tie two patterns tonight. I'll start off by tying the pheasant tail variation, and I want to show you what that looks like right now. Now, this is sometimes called a competition pheasant tail, or sometimes call it like a tactical pheasant tail with a slotted tungsten head. I'll try to get that nice and close to the camera so you can see it. Put some back on that. So we've got a black nickel bead. We've got a 60-degree jig head here with a black nickel slotted tungsten bead. The other materials on this fly are really simple. Just going to use pheasant tail. Going to use some copper ultra wire in size BR. So some brassy size copper ultra wire. Then you can use any type of flash for the back wing case as you want. You know, seeing this pattern on video and being able to see the wing case on it is really tough. But there's a little wing case under there, a little holographic wing case, and that's made from a Unimylar is what I use for it. This is a peacock orange. It has two different colors on it. It's got greenish peacock on one side. It's got this bright orange on the other side. But you can literally use any type of flash that you want. My table's completely covered in stuff right now. I've got regular holographic silver flashaboo back here, just regular opal flashaboo, like a medium sized tinsel. Anything you want to add a little bit of pop to the wing case on it. Not overly important for that material. One material I do really like that I use for it that creates the thorax of the fly. Normally you would use a peacock herl, but sometimes that can be a little bit easy to break, sometimes a little bit more difficult to work with. You don't have, in my opinion, as good a control over the material, and you don't have the ability to kind of brush that material out to create a really fat bugginess. And so what I use to create the thorax on these is really a simple product from FTD, which is Fly Tyer's Dungeon. It's called Wee Folk Dubbing, and it's in a peacock color. I'll get it out of here because you got to kind of see it in the light to see some of the colorations in here. You've got coppers and greens. And so what it's meant to do is and it's got some holographic stuff in there too. What it's meant to do is kind of imitate that peak sheen that you would get from a peacock herl. So that's a really good product. If you've never gone on Fly Tyer's Dungeon to order materials, they have great stuff, and it's just dirt cheap. So we'll tie that one first, and then we'll jump in and we'll tie the second pattern that I'm really excited to show you. All right, I'm gonna switch my camera around and get my vise set up. Just give me 1 second here. It takes just a second to get everything situated. All right, hopefully you see some vise jaws there. All right, here's the finished product. Now, the one thing that I'm shooting on an iPad right now, the one thing I don't like about it is that it's a little bit flirty with the focus. It'll move it in and out. There's no way for me to lock it on my jaws, unfortunately, unless I'm in the camera mode. So, well, it'll kind of zoom in and out of focus. You'll just have to give it a second. And I can reposition it as I'm watching the camera too, so I can get that fixed for you. But this is a really simple pattern. It's a pheasant tail, but it's just what's special about it, I think, is the addition of that material up front, creating that different color kind of sheen on the thorax, and that underside glow from that tinsel on the underside. And if you tie this on a tungsten slotted head with a 60-degree, it'll flip the hook upside down, which is really handy when you're using it as a dropper off of a heavier fly, when you're fishing a 2-fly rig, usually under an indicator in moving water, because this fly is the one that's down close to the bottom where all the rocks are. It's the one that's most likely to get caught up. And just like in that last pattern that I tied for you, I love those flies that ride hook point up. Those save me a lot of trouble and a lot of time on the vise because you don't lose them nearly as often. So let's get the hook in the vise. All right, like I said, this is a 60-degree jig hook. I get these hooks from a buddy of mine named Dennis Stead. He gives me a really, really good deal on them. If you want that info, just get my number or shoot me an email. He sells tons of these hooks, and it gives you a great deal. So I've got that 60 degrees. This is a size 12. I'll tie these in size 12, 14, 16, usually not much smaller than that, unless I'm on really little water. And then I might tie them in an 18. But really simple here. I start out with, there's all different kinds of thread you can use. Typically, I'll use something like a UTC 70 in a black or a white or a red. You can just as easily use, if you have Danvilles, if you have a 6/0 and Danville, that's about right. Let's see what I've got here. Okay, so I've got a 6/0 in here. This is Flymaster waxed from Danville, and it's a blaze orange. So I like that bright color. It's going to add a little bit of color to the back end of the fly as a back hot spot, and then it'll allow us to make a nice bright collar on that fly too. So another thing I like about using these slotted tungsten heads is that they seat all the way up against the eyelet of the hook really nicely without having to add any addition of lead. So what I do is I'm going to start right behind the eye, or right behind the bead rather, and just lock it in with some thread wraps. I'm going to create a thread dam on there just to lock that bead all the way up front. And then I'm going to work my way all the way to the back, and not only all the way to the back to where the end of the shank is, but almost into the bend. You can kind of see where that is. I'm going to clip out my extra there. Then we're going to grab our pheasant. Got my pheasant tail here. Working at the Nature Center, I got a lot of friends who bring me plenty of pheasant tails, which is always nice. So if you ever need any, just drop in. I'll peel you off a few tails. So what we're going to do is we're going to take about, I'd say 8 to 10 pheasant tail fibers. I pulled these from the middle section, or actually the bottom 2/3 of the tail. And the reason for that is because that's where your longest fibers are. If you get all the way up towards the end, your fibers get short. If you get all the way down to the bottom, they get discolored and stubby. So try to use that, the first third up to the halfway point on that tail, on your pheasant tail. So we've got a lot of scruffy stuff down here at the end, right here. I actually leave that because it makes a nice grabbing point for me to palmer this around, or wrap this around rather. So what I'm going to do is switch hands. Now I've got the tips. I'm going to measure the tips up to the fly itself, and I want my tail to be the length of the shank. Really easy. So once I have that measurement in place, switch hands again. Now I've got my tie-in point. I hold it on my side of the hook. A little bit of a focus issue here. Put a wrap over this and see if it'll get happy again. There we go. One wrap over it just leans that material right over the top. And I always grab a hold of it and put 1 more, 2 more wraps over it until I have 3 wraps over that tailing material. Then grab it, pull it back out of your way, put 1, 2, 3 in front of it. Now you can drop it. Now you've got all this stuff up here that you're actually gonna wrap over. But before we do that, let's put in our counter wrap wire. So remember, we're gonna use UTC copper size BR. I'm just gonna peel off a little bit of that. All right, I've got, I don't know, 4 inches or so. So what we'll do with this is we'll put it right up to the side of the hook, and we'll run it all the way up towards the head. I've got it all the way up towards the head. I'm just going to put some wraps over it. latch it onto the side of the hook. I hold this material back out of the way, the pheasant tail, and I run my way back. Now right here, I don't go back behind there any further because I kind of want to leave that wire out for my first counter wrap. So I'm going to leave it out and leave it a little bit short of where I wrapped back to. Then I wrap all the way up to here, just behind the bead eye. Now right here, you can drop in a little whip finish or a half hitch. And do that. I'll get my thread out of the way. It makes it a little bit easier on me when I wrap up the pheasant tail. Now what I'm going to do is grab that pheasant tail, and you can see how it's kind of wrapped around itself here. It'll kind of order itself as you start to wrap it. So what I'll do is just grab it, start turning my vise, and we just want to wrap it all the way up to the front, doing close touching wraps, just like we would on a regular pheasant tail. I'm going to trap wrap it to seal it into place. So a few wraps behind, one. That's one wrap behind, two. And I'm going to do a couple in the front. I always hold my material out of the way. 1, 2, 3 in the front, a few more. This is what happens with 6/0. So, broke my thread. That's the worst on camera, right? As long as you don't do it on camera, you can deny it. So once I've got that tied back in, I'm just going to clip out my excess. And then I'm going to counter wrap my wire up. You have to bear with me. I'm doing this awfully close to the camera. So you see our blaze orange thread has kind of left us with a little bit of a bright spot kind of on the tail end, which I think is kind of cool. So I leave that in there. All right, once we have our wire wrapped in, I saw this the other day, kind of holding on to the fly and then helicoptering it off. That way you save your scissor tips. So you don't have to cut those off with your nice scissors. All right, now we're going to tie in that flash material that we talked about a little bit earlier. So whatever it is, whatever type of flash that you have is totally fine. Like I said, I'm going to use this Unimylar in Peacock Orange. I think I picked this up at a convention somewhere years and years ago, and it's lasted forever. Unless you tie with it a whole lot, it lasts a really long time. Because just a piece, that's 3 inches long will do half a dozen flies. Because what we're going to do is we're going to turn the fly upside down, and we're going to put, if you have whatever color, if you have the same color on both sides, it doesn't matter. I'm going to put my orange side down because I want my green side to show. So I'm going to get out of the way there. I'm going to put it on my side of the fly, and then as I put pressure on it, it's going to lift onto the top of the fly, just like that. I'm going to put a couple more wraps over it. Bring this thread forward. Got a little tag in here. I'm going to push back into what I'm going to create as the thorax. Get you a little bit better view on that. So all I've done is wrapped in that flash material. It's going to go over the back of the fly. And remember, even though this looks like it's upside down, that's how it's going to ride in the water. So this actually is going to be the back of the fly. All right, turn it back over. Pull that stuff out of the way. There we go. Now I'm going to come in with my Wee Folk dubbing, that peacock color dubbing. If you have peacock herl, if you have, I really like this too. This is something that you can, I picked this one up at Merton's, I think. That's here in Jeff City. It's Prism SLF, and it's in a peacock color, and it's got quite a bit more flash in it. So if you want something subdued, go with the Wee Folk dubbing, or something that doesn't have as much flash in it. And then if you want something really bright, you can go with that Prism SLF. But I think since we're putting in, a hot spot, holographic spot, we don't need as much color in it. So I'm just going to dub just a little bit onto here. So make your little dubbing noodle on there. Go ahead and start creating that thorax. I think I want just a touch more. You can easily overdo it, I think, with dubbing a lot of times, but on a size 12, I think we can go just a smidge more. This stuff is pretty easy to work with as far as, you know, attaching to the thread. I mean, I'm not using any wax or anything like that. This thread is pre-waxed, but I'm not using any extra. Pull out any of the long fibers that are kind of errant. Now I'm flipping it back over to you for just a second. Get in there close so you can see. Maybe it'll focus for you. There it goes. So all we've done is just dubbed in a little thorax. Really simple. This is a really simple fly. And if you don't add the little holographic wing case, you can crank these out really quick. So what I'm going to do is pull that wing casing material forward and then just put a wrap right behind the head to hold that casing material right on top of the fly. 3 behind it, 3 in front of it. Pull down tight, not so tight that I break my thread again, right? And then clip out your extra. So that's all there is to that fly. Put a whip finish in it, and then I'll show you one more thing. Now, when you whip finish this, you know, put a few good wraps in there. And the reason for that is because not only are we whip finishing, but we're creating a collar hot spot at the throat if you have a bright color. If you have a black or whatever, just do a few and cut it off there. But if you're attempting to create a hot spot like this, do a little bit thicker collar than you normally would. Get this guy to focus. There we go. Now we already have the fly a little bit buggy. You can see the thorax is just a little bit buggy. Actually, see if I can get this a little closer. Help our focusing. There we go. But if you want it to be even buggier, just come in with whatever your pick is. This one's a little a loon pick, and just really rough it up. Now, a couple of variations that you could do on this is if you have like a UV Flex glue. This is Solares Flex here. Or if you have like a Loon Fine Flex or a fly paint of any kind, anything like that will work. You can come in and cover up that top so that you cover up the wing case, give it a little bit of pop. You can also come in with a fly tying head cement. So I usually use Z-Mint, which is really good for big flies. It's not as easy to use with small flies just because it has kind of a big applicator, but you can just put a touch on there and call it good. There we go. All right, so that's it on that pattern. Pop it off here so that you can get a little bit of a closer look. Simple. It's just a variation on a pheasant tail with that little bit of hot spot, rides upside down in the water, sinks quickly. Drop it underneath like a tungsten-headed stonefly nymph pattern that's also heavily weighted if you're moving through fast water. You know, typically we're fishing these in the 11-point river where we're fishing in pretty deep pools or fast-moving runs where you have to drop that fly down quick into the strike zone. And that's where we find that it's most effective. I want to show you, before we take any questions or anything like that, I want to show you one variation on this pattern that I also fish a lot. So what you saw there was kind of in that natural classic color combo. This is just a slightly different color combo. This is an olive pheasant tail with the same thorax and hot spot material, but I've added in some rubber legs here. Just added some rubber legs to it. And those really small rubber legs are another Fly Tyers Dungeon product. They're baby bug legs, and they have them in every color. Then you can actually get them even smaller than that if you have really small flies. They come in like a mini size too. I mean, this stuff is almost as fine as a hair, which is really a lot smaller than something like Spanflex or like a silly leg. It's a much smaller diameter. So that's it on that one. That's kind of the Euro or competition style, whatever you want to call it, kind of heavy pheasant tail variation.